The text came in while I was standing at the pier, holding two boarding passes I'd paid for myself. My mom's name lit up the screen. "You're not coming. Dad wants just family this trip. Don't make it a thing." I read it twice. The gangway was 30 feet away, already crowded with people I'd bought tickets for. I'm Wendy Thorne, 34, and for 12 years I'd been the one who paid. I thought the cruise was cruel, but the cruise was the smallest thing my parents took from me that month. I just didn't know it yet. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where we sit with the quiet betrayals that happen inside families and the women who finally stop paying for them. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. I stepped out of the boarding line so I wouldn't cry in front of strangers. Then I called my dad, because part of me still believed there'd been a mistake. He picked up on the fourth ring, and I could hear the ship's music behind him. "Dad, Mom just texted me. She said I'm not coming." There was a pause, the kind that tells you everything. "Your mother handles all that, honey," he said. "You should talk to her." I asked him if he knew I'd been cut. He said he had to go find their room. He hung up before I could answer. I stood there with the ocean wind pulling at my hair and did the math I didn't want to do. Everyone already knew. My brother knew. My sister-in-law knew, because she was the one taking my cabin. They had all quietly agreed I wasn't family enough to sit at a dinner I had funded. I looked at the second boarding pass in my hand, the one with my own name printed on it, and I understood it had never been mine to use. A crew member in white asked if I was boarding. I said no. I said I'd changed my mind. She smiled the way you smile at someone you can tell is lying, and she took the passes back. Somewhere above me, on a deck I would never see, my family was unpacking in rooms I had reserved. I didn't scream. I didn't call anyone else. I just walked back to my car and sat there long enough to watch the ship pull away from the dock, slow and enormous, carrying everyone who was supposed to love me. Then I drove to the house, the one I bought them. I still had a key. You should know what 12 years of paying looks like, because it wasn't one grand gesture. It was 1,000 small ones. When I was 22 and just starting out, I covered their electric bill so it wouldn't get shut off. At 25, I paid off my dad's truck. At 28, I took over their mortgage payments, then their medical copays, then the property taxes they kept forgetting. When I got my financial planning license and my little practice started to make real money, I bought them the house outright. All $966,000 of it, because my mom cried at an open house and said she'd always wanted a real dining room. I paid for the cruise last, 4 months ago, 40 years of marriage, and I told myself it was a gift. But I know now it was a purchase. I was buying a chair at the table. I kept paying, hoping the bill would finally buy me a seat. That's the part I'm not proud of. I'm good with money. I can look at anyone's finances and tell you in 10 minutes exactly where they're bleeding, but I could never look at my own family that way, because I didn't want to see the answer. I wanted to believe that if I gave enough, they'd stop treating me like the daughter who left, the one who got too successful, the one who forgot where she came from. I never forgot. I just started sending money instead of coming to Sunday dinner, and somewhere in there, the money became the only reason they picked up the phone. Driving to that house, I told myself I was only going to grab a few of my things. I didn't know yet there was nothing of mine left to grab. Before I drove off, I did something I still can't fully explain. I got out of my car and walked back to the edge of the pier to watch them leave. Maybe I wanted proof. Maybe I wanted to see if anyone would notice I wasn't there. The ship was still close enough that I could make out figures on the upper deck. And there they were. My dad in the white cap I'd bought him. My mom in a scarf, laughing at something. My brother Trevor with a drink already in his hand. And beside him, at the rail, waving cheerfully at the shore like she was in a commercial, my sister-in-law Kayla. She was standing exactly where I would have stood. She saw me. I'm sure of it. She lifted her hand a little higher, and for 1 second I thought she was waving at me, until I realized she was just waving at the idea of shore, at anyone, at no one. Nobody up there was looking for me. Why would they? I'd already served my purpose. The horn blew, low and final, and I felt it in my chest like a door closing. A woman next to me sighed and said, "Don't you just love a send-off?" I said yes. I said it was beautiful. Then I turned around and walked back to my car with a decision hardening in me that I didn't have words for yet. I wasn't going to spend the next 2 weeks crying into my couch while they toasted each other on my dime. I was going to go to the house, and I was going to take back the small handful of things that were still mine. That was the plan. It was such a small, reasonable plan. It didn't survive the front door. On the drive out to the house, I called Priya. She's my closest friend and, conveniently, an attorney, which means she's the only person who tells me the truth without softening it first. I told her about the text. I told her about the pier. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Wendy, I want you to go home. Not to their house. Your home. Order something greasy, take a bath, and let yourself be furious for one night." It was good advice. It was the advice I'd have given a client. "I just want a few of my things back," I said. "The photo albums, my grandmother's ring I left in the guest room. It's a 25-minute drive, Priya. I'm already halfway." She sighed. "You know that house is a wound, right? Going there tonight is like pressing on a bruise to see if it still hurts." I told her it wasn't like that. I told her I was fine, using the voice I use when I am absolutely not fine. She let it go, the way good friends sometimes do when they know you have to learn something the hard way. "Call me after," she said. "And Wendy, whatever you find, don't do anything tonight. Promise me you'll sleep on it." I promised. I meant it too. I pulled into the long driveway a little after 7, the sky going that soft bruised purple it gets in Oregon in early fall. The porch light was off. I walked up with my key already in my hand, the same key I'd carried for 3 years, and I slid it into the lock the way I'd done 100 times. It didn't turn. I tried again, jiggled it, pulled it out, and looked at it like it had betrayed me. The lock had been changed. I stood on that porch feeling stupid, holding a key to a house I'd bought that no longer wanted me. A voice came from the next yard. It was Diane, the neighbor, watering her hydrangeas in the last of the light. "Wendy? Is that you, sweetheart?" She'd always been kind to me. She came over, wiping her hands, and said the family had a locksmith out a few weeks back, some insurance thing, and that your mother left a spare with her in case of emergencies. She had it in a drawer. She didn't hesitate to hand it over, because in her mind I was still the daughter, still the one who owned the place. I let myself in. The house smelled like my mother's candles and someone else's dinner. I went straight for the guest room, the one I'd always used, where I kept a few things because they'd insisted I should feel like I had a room there. I opened the door. The bed was stripped. The dresser was empty. My grandmother's ring, my photo albums, the box of letters my late aunt had written me, all of it gone. I opened the closet. Bare hangers. In the corner of the room sat a single cardboard box with a charity's logo on the side, half full of my old sweaters, taped and labeled in my mother's handwriting, "Donate." They hadn't packed my things to save them for me. They'd packed them to give away, before a cruise they didn't invite me to, in a house they didn't think I had any claim to anymore. That was the moment the grief turned into something colder and more useful. I sat down on the bare mattress in the room that used to be mine, in the house I still owned, and I stopped crying. I started paying attention. I told myself I'd leave. Instead, I walked through the house like it was a case file. In the kitchen, the drawer where my mother kept the mail was so full it wouldn't close all the way. I'm not proud of opening it, but I'd stopped being proud around the time I found a donation box with my name on it. Most of it was ordinary. Coupons, church bulletins, a birthday card from someone named Estelle. And then, near the bottom, a bundle of envelopes held together with a rubber band, every single one addressed to me. To Wendy Thorne, at this address. A house I had never lived in for a single night. My name, my correct middle initial, at their address, in the kind of official windowed envelopes you learn to recognize as an adult. Bank logos, a credit card company, something from a lender I'd never heard of. I stood in that quiet kitchen holding mail that had my name on it, but had never been meant for my eyes. My first thought was that it was a mistake, a forwarding error, the post office being sloppy. But there were too many of them, spanning too long, all neatly bundled and kept. You don't keep a stranger's misdelivered mail in a rubber band in a drawer for years. You keep it because it matters to you. Because you're waiting for it. Because you need to know when a payment is due. I didn't open them yet. Some instinct, the same one that makes me tell clients not to sign anything they haven't read twice, told me to slow down. I set the bundle on the counter, lined the envelopes up by postmark date, and started to build a timeline in my head. The oldest one was from 12 years ago, the year I turned 22. Before I let myself open a single envelope, I needed to know exactly where I stood, legally, in this house. Because if I was going to press on this bruise, I wanted to know whose bruise it was. I keep copies of everything. It's a professional deformity. Somewhere in the cloud folder on my phone was the closing packet from when I bought this place 3 years ago. I sat at their kitchen table, under a light fixture I'd paid to install, and I pulled it up. The warranty deed. The title. My hands were steadier than I expected. And there it was, in the flat legal language that doesn't care about your feelings. The property was held in my name. Wendy A. Thorne, sole owner. My parents had lived here for 3 years, but they had never been on the deed. At the time, I'd kept it in my name for practical reasons: tax treatment, insurance, the way you do when you're the one who actually wrote the check for the whole thing, because that's what I'd done. I'd paid cash, the full $966,000, no loan, no lender, no note against it. So the title was as clean as a title gets. My mom had wanted it that way, actually. Just keep it simple, honey. Put it under you. We trust you. I'd thought she was being humble. Now I understood she'd never imagined a world where I would use that, where the daughter who paid would ever remember she also owned. They had changed the locks on a house that was, in every way the law recognized, mine. They had boxed up my belongings and labeled them for donation in a home I held the title to. They had told me I wasn't family in a dining room I could legally padlock tomorrow morning. The power in this house did not sit where everyone had assumed it sat. It sat with the woman on the bare mattress, and none of them knew it yet. I want to be honest about the temptation. For about 10 minutes, sitting at that table, I fantasized about the loud version, calling a locksmith at dawn, changing the locks back, leaving their suitcases on the lawn to find when the ship docked. Making it a scene, a story people would tell. But I've spent my whole career watching people torch their own futures for the satisfaction of one good scene. I know what a tantrum costs. So I made a different decision. And it's the decision this whole story turns on. I decided to treat my own family like a client's messy finances. No emotion, no assumptions, just documents, dates, and the truth they add up to. I found a legal pad in the junk drawer, the same drawer with the mail, and I started writing down what I knew. The lock, the donation box, the bundle of mail with my name and their address, the deed in my name. Then I drew a line and wrote the questions. Why is my name on mail here? What are these accounts? When did this start? I looked at the oldest postmark again. 12 years. The same span I'd been paying. The same span I'd told myself I was being generous. A pattern was forming at the edge of my vision, and I did not want to look at it directly yet, because I was afraid of what it would make the last 12 years mean. Priya's voice was in my head. Don't do anything tonight. So I didn't do anything loud. But I took photographs of every envelope, front and back, still sealed. I put the bundle back exactly as I'd found it, rubber band and all. And I decided that tomorrow, I would stop being their daughter and start being an investigator. There was one envelope I couldn't put back unopened. It was the newest, postmarked only 9 days ago, and it wasn't sealed all the way. The flap had come loose in the drawer. I told myself that made it fair game. I slid the letter out. It was from a lender, a name that sounded like a strip mall storefront, and it was a denial. We regret to inform you that your recent application for a personal loan in the amount of $40,000 has been declined. My name at the top. This address. An application I had never filled out, for money I had never asked for, declined for reasons that had nothing to do with me. I read it 3 times, and each time the floor felt a little less solid. Someone had walked into a lender or sat down at a computer and asked to borrow $40,000 in my name. And the only reason I was holding this letter instead of never knowing was that this time, for once, they'd said no. How many times had someone said yes? That was the question that changed the temperature of the whole night. This wasn't a family being cold. This wasn't even a family being greedy about a cruise. Cold and greedy I could have survived. This was a signature that wasn't mine on a document I'd never seen, and a name at the top that was. I took a photo of the denial letter, slid it back into its envelope, and returned the bundle to the drawer. Then I sat very still in my mother's kitchen and let myself understand, for the first time, that I might not know who these people actually were. First thing in the morning, I was going to find out exactly how far down this went. I already suspected it went all the way to the bottom. I didn't sleep much. At 8 the next morning, I called Dana. Dana and I came up together at my first firm before she moved over to one of the big credit bureaus, and she's the kind of person who answers on the second ring even when she shouldn't. I kept it simple. I told her I thought I might be looking at identity theft, that there were accounts and mail I couldn't explain, and I needed to see my full credit file. Everything. Not the friendly consumer summary. She got quiet in a way that told me she'd heard this tone from people before. Okay, she said. First, breathe. Second, you're going to pull your reports from all 3 bureaus, and I mean the real ones. Have you ever actually looked, Wendy? Not your score. The whole file. And that's when I felt the second wave of shame, because the honest answer was no. I'm a financial planner. I check other people's reports for a living. I'd always assumed mine was pristine because my score was excellent, and a good score feels like proof that nothing's wrong. But a good score can hide a lot when someone is careful, when they make the minimum payments on time, when they never let it default. I never pulled the full file, I admitted. I know how that sounds. It sounds human, she said. Come in this afternoon, bring your ID, your social, proof of address. We'll go through all of it line by line, and Wendy, whatever's in there, we'll deal with it. But you have to be ready to see things you can't unsee. I told her I'd been getting ready for that since 7 o'clock last night. I hung up, looked at the photos of a dozen envelopes on my phone, and understood that I was about to learn the real size of the hole. I had a few hours before the appointment, so I did the only thing that has ever made me feel steady. I built a spreadsheet. This is the part where being who I am stopped being a wound and started being a weapon. I opened a blank sheet and made columns. Year, amount I gave them, what they told me it was for. And then a 4th column I left blank, labeled what was really happening. 12 rows, 1 for each year. I filled in the first 3 columns from memory and from my own bank records, which, unlike my credit file, I did keep close. The electric bill, the truck, the mortgage takeover, the medical copays, the house, the cruise. Beside each number, the story they'd told me. We're just a little short this month. The dealership is threatening to repossess. Your father's heart, the deductible. Line after line of my own generosity laid out in a grid, and it looked so reasonable that I almost talked myself out of the whole thing. That's how good manipulation works. Each individual ask is defensible. It's only when you put 12 years in a single column that you see the machine. I stared at that empty 4th column, the one I couldn't fill in yet, and I understood that whatever Dana showed me this afternoon would go right there. I didn't cry over the spreadsheet. You don't cry over a spreadsheet. You just keep entering rows until the pattern is undeniable, and then you decide what you're going to do about it. I saved the file. I named it, and I only realized how bleak the name was after I typed it. I called it What I Owed. Then I grabbed my keys and drove to Dana's office to find out what I'd actually been paying for. Dana's office had 2 monitors and a box of tissues she'd clearly moved to the center of the desk before I arrived, which told me she already knew how this went. She pulled all 3 files while I watched. My score loaded first, high and healthy, and for one stupid second I felt relief. Then she scrolled down to the accounts. There were more than I could hold in my head at once. A store card I'd never opened. 2 personal loans, a line of credit, another credit card, and another. Some closed, some current. All under my name, my social, my date of birth. Some listed an address I'd lived at years ago. Several listed the house. Dana didn't say anything at first. She just let me look, let me count, watched my face do the thing faces do when the ground moves. "These aren't mine," I said, and my voice came out flat and strange. "Dana, I never opened any of these." "I believe you," she said. "I've seen this pattern before. Real social, real birthday, real name, opened carefully over years, kept just current enough to never trigger an alert. This isn't some hacker in another country. This is someone who has your information because you gave it to them, or because they had it all along." I thought about being 22, and my dad sitting me down to help me build credit, taking my brand new Social Security card and my birth certificate to keep them safe in the fireproof box. I thought about how proud I'd been that he was finally taking an interest. I looked at the oldest account on the screen. Opened when I was 22. I felt the entire architecture of my life quietly rearrange itself around a new and terrible foundation. Dana printed everything. She said I'd need paper for what came next, and she was right, though I didn't know it yet. While the printer ran, she explained what I was looking at, in the careful voice of someone who has delivered this news before. "What you've got here is what we call familiar fraud," she said. "Family identity theft. It's the most common kind we see, and it's the hardest to catch and the hardest to prosecute." I asked her why. She counted the reasons on her fingers. "Because the thief has legitimate access to your documents. Because they know your history well enough to answer security questions. Because they make the payments, so nothing defaults, and no alarm ever rings. And," she said, meeting my eyes, "because the victims almost never report it. People will turn in a stranger in a heartbeat," she said. "But turn in your own mother? Your own father? Most people find out and just quietly clean it up and never say a word, because the alternative is admitting your family did this to you and then doing something about it." She let that sit. "The system runs on the fact that you love them. That's the collateral." I asked what my options were. She said we could dispute the accounts, but disputes work best when there's a police report behind them, when it's officially documented as fraud. Otherwise, the lenders push back, and the accounts follow you around. "You can clean this up quietly," she said, "or you can clean it up completely. But completely means putting it in writing that your family committed a crime. There's no version of completely that keeps the peace." I took the stack of paper she handed me, still warm, and I understood I was standing at a fork I could not unwalk. That night, I couldn't stop replaying being 22. I want you to understand that I wasn't a careless kid. I was a scholarship student with a part-time job and a plan. But when your own father sits you down and says he wants to help you build a strong financial future, you don't hear a con. You hear a dad finally showing up. He told me the smart move was to add me as an authorized user on a card to establish history. He needed my social security number and a copy of my birth certificate to set it up properly. He put them in the gray fireproof box in their closet, the one with the little key, and he told me they'd be safest there. I remember feeling grateful. I remember thinking that this was what having a family was supposed to feel like. Someone older looking out for you, teaching you the things nobody teaches you in school. For 12 years, I'd carried that memory as a warm one. Now, I turned it over and saw the other side of it. He hadn't been teaching me to build credit. He'd been building it in my name, for them. The authorized user card was real. It was also the seed. Everything on Dana's screen had grown out of that afternoon in the closet, out of my birth certificate in a box I wasn't allowed to keep, out of a 22-year-old's gratitude. I thought about calling him right then and screaming into the phone across the miles of ocean between us. But he was on a ship, drinking a cocktail I'd paid for, and there was nothing he could say that would make the accounts on that printout disappear. So instead, I opened my spreadsheet, and in the row for the year I turned 22, in that fourth column, I finally typed something. I typed, "It started here." The next morning, I did the work I do best. I laid the credit printouts next to my spreadsheet and I matched them up, year by year, like reconciling two sets of books. And a second pattern emerged, worse than the first. Every time I had given them money, there was, around the same window, a new account opened in my name. The year I covered the electric bill, a store card. The year I paid off the truck, a personal loan for $11,000. The year I took over the mortgage, a line of credit. It was as if my generosity had a shadow, a second withdrawal happening in the dark every time I made one in the light. I hadn't just been giving them money. I'd been giving them money while they borrowed more against me, so that even my kindness became cover. When I sent a check, it looked like the family was getting help from their successful daughter. Nobody looks twice at a daughter helping her parents. It was the perfect camouflage. My open generosity hid their hidden theft because who suspects the woman who's already paying? I sat back and understood the full elegance of it, and elegance is the right word, because it was designed. This wasn't 12 years of impulsive grabs. This was a system, patient and quiet, and I had been both its funder and its cover story, its victim and its alibi, without ever knowing. And it predated this house by nearly a decade. The oldest accounts traced back through apartments and addresses I'd long since moved out of, opened years before anyone ever set foot in the place with the real dining room. Only the newest few even carried this address at all. The house was barely 3 years old. The scheme was 4 times that. It had simply followed my parents here, the way it had followed them from every roof before this one, quietly changing its return address each time they moved. I don't cry easily, but I put my head down on that stack of paper for a minute, just 1 minute, and let myself feel how completely I'd been used by the only people who were supposed to be safe. Then I lifted my head, because a minute is all you get. And I called Priya, because I needed to know exactly what the law would let me do. Priya met me at a coffee shop with her laptop and her lawyer face on. I slid the printouts across the table and watched her go very still. She's seen a lot. This got to her. She read for a long time before she spoke. "Wendy, I need you to understand what this is," she said quietly. "This isn't a family being unfair. This is identity theft and financial fraud. If you report it, and I think you know this, it's criminal. People go to prison for this. Your parents, your brother, if he's involved. This is not a boundary. This is a criminal complaint." I told her I understood. "I don't think you do yet," she said gently. "Right now you can still walk away. You can freeze your credit, quietly untangle what you can, and never speak to them again. That's a real option, and no one would blame you. But the moment you file a report, you can't take it back. It becomes a case. Detectives, subpoenas, maybe an arrest. You'd be the person who put her own mother in the system." She wasn't trying to talk me out of it. She was making sure I saw the whole price tag before I bought. That's what a good friend does. I looked out the window at people walking by who had no idea what it costs to sign your own name back onto your own life. "What would you do?" I asked her. She didn't answer for a while. "I'd want to know if it was still happening," she finally said. "Because if it's still open, if there are active accounts, then quietly walking away doesn't protect you. It just leaves the door unlocked behind you." That landed. There was an open loan on that printout. $40,000, still pending. Before I did anything irreversible, I decided to give my mother one chance. Not because I owed her one, but because I needed to be able to live with myself afterward, and I needed to hear what she'd say. Ship Wi-Fi is spotty and expensive, but my mother always kept her phone close. She answered on the second try, cheerful, the sound of a poolside behind her. "Wendy, honey, I hope you're not still sulking about the cruise. Your father just needed some real family time. I kept my voice level. I told her I'd been to the house. I told her I'd found mail with my name on it, and accounts I never opened, going back years. I gave her the opening. I said, Mom, I need you to explain this to me, because right now it looks like a crime. There was a pause, and I heard her move somewhere quieter. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. Not to guilt, but to management. Now, Wendy, don't go making this into something ugly, she said. You were always so dramatic. We're a family. Families share things. Your father set some of that up years ago to help everyone, and you had plenty. You never even noticed. You never even noticed. She said it like it was my fault for not noticing I was being robbed. She didn't deny it. She reframed it. She turned 12 years of fraud into families share things, and she turned my discovery into me being difficult. I asked her, one more time, plainly, to just tell me the truth. She said, The truth is, you've always thought your money made you better than us. Then she said she had to go. The massage appointment I'd paid for was calling, and she hung up. I set the phone down and I stopped hoping. After that call, I stopped asking permission to protect myself. The first thing I did was small, but it was the first lock I'd ever put on my own front door. I placed an initial fraud alert on my credit file. You only have to contact one of the 3 bureaus, and they're required to notify the other 2. And it's free. And it takes about 15 minutes online. 15 minutes. That's all it took to do the thing I'd been too loyal, or too scared, or too hopeful to do for 12 years. A fraud alert doesn't undo the past. What it does is force any new creditor to verify my identity before opening anything else. It's a speed bump. It buys time. And it meant that if anyone, tried to open one more account in my name while my family was floating around the Caribbean, they'd hit a wall with my name on it. I sat with my finger over the confirm button for a second longer than I needed to, because I knew that clicking it was the first thing I'd ever done that my mother would consider a betrayal. And that was almost funny, if you have my sense of humor. 12 years of paying their bills, buying their house, funding their anniversary, and the betrayal was going to be me refusing to let them steal anymore. I clicked it. The confirmation page loaded, plain and bureaucratic, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not happiness, not even relief. Exactly. Control. For the first time, I was the one deciding what happened to my name. It was a small thing, but small locks are how you learn to build bigger ones. And I was going to need a much bigger one, because the worst of it was still sitting in a folder I hadn't opened yet. Dana called me back the next day. She'd gone deeper into the oldest account, the one from when I was 22, because something about the dates had been nagging her too. I pulled the origination records, she said. Wendy, I want you to look at when this first account was actually opened. I had the printout in front of me, and I took a yellow highlighter and marked the line as she read me the date. It was a Tuesday in September, 12 years ago. I knew that week. I would have known it in my sleep, because that was the week I wrote my very first check to my parents. The electric bill, the one that started everything, the moment I decided that being a good daughter meant being a paying one. The very same week I first opened my wallet to them, they opened their first account in my name. The generosity and the theft weren't just parallel, they were born together, in the same 7 days, out of the same girl who wanted to be loved. I sat there looking at that highlighted yellow line on the printout, and I knew I'd never forget the shape of it. This was the thing I'd carry now, the way you carry the moment you learn the real reason for something. Not the cruise, not the empty room. This. A single line on a credit report, marked in yellow, dated the same week as my first act of love. If you've ever added up everything you gave to a family that never once added up what you were worth, tell me about it in the comments. I read every single one, because I know now that the adding up is how it starts. I capped the highlighter, and I understood that the question was no longer whether they'd wronged me. The question was how long they'd planned to keep doing it. For a day, I let the whole thing sit on me, because you can't skip the part where it crushes you a little. I added up the accounts. Between the loans, the cards, the line of credit, they had run somewhere north of $200,000 through my name over 12 years. Some paid off, some still carried balances, one still wide open. And laid against that number was my own giving. The mortgage, the house, the cruise, hundreds of thousands more, freely handed over. When I stacked the two together, the shape of my adult life came into focus, and it was uglier than I'd let myself imagine. I had spent my 20s and 30s being drained from two directions at once, in the light and in the dark by the same three people, and I had called it family. I kept paying, hoping the bill would finally buy me a seat. That was the sentence that kept coming back. And now it had a second, crueler meaning. There was never going to be a seat. The seat was the bait. The whole point of keeping me hopeful was to keep me paying, and the whole point of keeping me paying was to keep the cover story clean. A generous daughter is invisible. A generous daughter doesn't get investigated. I had been the perfect front for my own robbery. I let myself feel the full weight of that, alone in my apartment, for one long evening. And then, the way I always do, I got up, washed my face, and went back to the spreadsheet. Because grief is a room you can visit, but you can't live there. Not when there's an open loan with your name on it and a family due back at port in 8 days. I had work to do, and not much time to do it. I needed to know who actually held the pen. It's one thing to know your family stole from you. It's another to know which hand signed. Dana helped me request copies of the original applications on a few of the accounts, the ones lenders keep on file. It took some doing, and some of them wanted a police report I didn't have yet. But 2 of them came through. I spread them on my table and looked at the signatures where my name was supposed to be. They were not my handwriting. I know my own signature. The particular way I loop the W. The way I never bother with the H. These were careful forgeries. Close, but wrong. The way a copied signature always is. And on one application, in a section for a cosigner that should have been blank, was a second name I recognized instantly. My brother Trevor, in his own confident scrawl, listed as a reference with his real phone number, too arrogant or too lazy to fake his own part. Trevor. Of course it was Trevor. The golden boy who always had a deal about to close, who drove cars he couldn't afford, who'd been between opportunities for a decade. He hadn't just gone along with it. He'd been holding the pen. My parents had opened the door, back when I was 22, and my brother had walked through it again and again ever since, forging my name, using my clean history like a credit card he never had to pay off himself. I photographed both applications. I felt the case shifting from a vague family betrayal into something with names on it, and dates, and forged signatures. This was no longer a story. It was evidence. And evidence is a language I don't cry in. That evening, my phone lit up with a video call from a number I almost didn't recognize, and a small face filled the screen. Sadie, my niece, Trevor's daughter, 9 years old, all gap teeth and enthusiasm. She'd figured out how to use her mom's phone and called her favorite aunt, because I was still her favorite aunt, because children don't read credit reports. Aunt Wendy, we're on the boat. There's a pool with a slide. My heart did something complicated. Whatever her father and grandparents were, this child was innocent, and she loved me, and I loved her back, with a fierceness that scared me a little. I asked her if she was having fun. She babbled about the slide, the ice cream, the magician, and then she said the thing that turned my blood cold. Grandma says when we get home we're going to be rich. She says there's a big surprise and our whole family's going to have lots of money soon. I kept my face calm, the way you do for a child. I asked her, lightly, what kind of surprise. She shrugged with her whole body. I don't know. Grandma said don't tell Aunt Wendy 'cause it's a secret. Don't tell Aunt Wendy. So there was a next move already in motion. Something big enough that they'd promised a 9-year-old riches, something they specifically wanted hidden from me. Kayla's voice came from off-screen, sharp, and the call ended abruptly. I sat holding a dark phone. Whatever the big surprise was, it hadn't happened yet, which meant I still had time to get in front of it. But it also meant that the thing I'd been treating as a closed case, a wound to clean and walk away from, was actually still open, still growing, and now it had reached far enough to put ideas of easy money into a 9-year-old's head. After Sadie's call, I stopped thinking in terms of cleanup and started thinking in terms of defense. A fraud alert is a speed bump. What I needed now was a wall, so I placed a security freeze on my credit with all 3 bureaus. And here's a thing most people don't know, the thing that had let this go on so long. A freeze with one bureau does not carry to the others. You have to contact each one separately. Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, one at a time, and lock each door yourself. It's free. It doesn't hurt your score. And when it's done, nobody, not a lender, not a landlord, not my own brother with a forged signature, can open a single new account in my name until I personally lift it with a pin only I hold. I did all 3 that night, sitting at my kitchen counter with a cup of tea going cold, methodically, the way I'd wished someone had taught me to do at 22. 3 phone calls, 3 PINs, 3 walls. With each one, I felt the ground get a little firmer under me. They could be as charming as they wanted at their captain's dinner. They could promise Sadie all the money in the world. But the machine they'd built ran on open access to my name, and I had just cut the power to it. Whatever the big surprise was, it was going to hit a locked door with my name on the deadbolt. I finished the last call, hung up, and sat in the quiet. I wasn't cleaning up a mess anymore. I was closing a business that had operated for 12 years without my consent. And there was one account I already knew the freeze couldn't fix because it was already open and already dangerous. The freeze protected my future. It did nothing about the loan that was already open. On the printout, one account glared at me, current and active, a personal loan with a balance still climbing. Money someone had already borrowed in my name and was still, apparently, drawing against. Every day it stayed open, it was mine on paper. If it went unpaid, my credit, my real credit, the thing I'd built with my own hands, would take the hit. And if it defaulted, the collectors wouldn't come for Trevor. They'd come for Wendy A. Thorne, the name on the note. I called the lender the next morning and hit the wall I expected. Because the account was, on paper, mine. They couldn't just close it because I said it was fraud over the phone. They needed documentation. They needed, said the polite man on the line, a police report or an FTC identity theft report before they could treat it as fraud, rather than a customer trying to walk away from her own debt. There it was again. The same door Priya and Dana had both pointed at. You cannot fully undo this quietly. The quiet options, the freeze, the alert. They stop the bleeding going forward. But to close the wound already open, to get this active loan off my name for good, I would have to make it official. I would have to put in writing, to a federal agency and a police department, that my family committed a crime. I hung up with the lender and sat looking at that open loan, ticking upward, a countdown with my name on it. The soft path was closing. Every road that actually protected me ran straight through a decision I'd been avoiding since the first night in that kitchen. I called Priya and told her I was ready to hear the whole process. Priya laid it out for me like a map, because that's what I needed. Not comfort, a map. Freezing your credit protects you going forward, she said. It does not erase the past. It does not close that open loan. And it does not stop your brother from trying again the second you lift it. If you want to be clean, truly clean, you need 3 things. She held up a finger for each. 1. A formal identity theft report through identitytheft.gov, the official FTC channel. 2. A police report filed with your local department, which turns your affidavit into a real case. 3. Once those exist, you use them to dispute every fraudulent account and get them removed for good. I asked the question I already knew the answer to. And there's no way to do that without it becoming criminal. No, she said. The report is the crime being reported. Wendy, I have to say this plainly, because you're my friend, and because you're the kind of person who talks herself out of protecting herself. If you file, your parents and your brother will very likely face charges. This is not you being vindictive. This is you telling the truth to the government about something that actually happened. But the peace, the pretending, the Sunday dinners you're not invited to anyway, that ends the second you sign. There is no version of the truth that keeps them out of it. I sat with that. Somewhere out on the ocean, my mother was promising my niece we'd all be rich. My name was on an open loan climbing higher every day, and the only door that led anywhere safe had a sign on it that read, "The family you knew ends here." I told Priya I understood, and then I asked her to help me draft the report. Drafting a thing and doing a thing are different animals. It took me 2 evenings to write the identity theft report, because identitytheft.gov walks you through it methodically, account by account, and every field I filled in made it more real. Account number, date opened, estimated amount, relationship to suspected person, relationship to suspected person. I stared at that field for a long time. There's no drop-down option for the people who made me. I typed parents and sibling, and it looked obscene in the little white box. When I finished, the report sat there complete, and all that was left was a single button: submit. I moved my cursor over it and I could not click. I want to be honest with you about that moment, because I think it's the truest thing in this whole story. It wasn't loyalty that stopped me. It wasn't love either. Not exactly. It was the knowledge that the second I clicked, I would lose the only family I had ever been given, forever, and that I would be the one who did it. Not them, with their locks and their donation box and their forged signatures. Me, with my mouse. They'd get to tell everyone I destroyed the family, and there'd be a government form to prove I'm the one who filed. I sat there for a very long time with my finger not moving. Outside my window, the city went about its evening, and I understood that whatever I decided in the next few minutes, I would carry for the rest of my life. So I didn't click. Not yet. I closed the laptop, not out of weakness, but because a decision that size deserved to be made in daylight with a clear head. I gave myself one more night. It would turn out to be a very important night. That night, Trevor called me from the ship. Not a video call, just his voice, warm as a salesman's over a bad connection. I almost didn't pick up. I'm glad I did. Wendy, hey sis. Listen, I know Mom's been a little intense about the trip, you know how she gets. But hey, we're all family, right? Water under the bridge. I said nothing, which he took as encouragement. So listen, when we get back, I actually want to sit down with you. Just us. I've got a thing coming together. A real opportunity this time. And honestly, you're the smart one. You get this stuff. We're gonna need to talk about, some paperwork. Nothing big. Just some family financial stuff to sort out. Some paperwork. Some family financial stuff. He was fishing to see if I'd noticed anything, and he was setting up the next ask in the same breath. He had no idea I was sitting in front of a credit report with his forged handwriting on it. He thought I was still the goose. Still the girl who signs whatever her family puts in front of her because she's so desperate to belong. Sure, Trevor, I said, keeping my voice easy. When you get back, we'll sort out the paperwork. I heard the relief in his laugh. He said something about missing me. Said Sadie missed me, and he was probably even telling the truth. In the shallow way people like him tell the truth. He hung up. And in the quiet after, any last flicker of guilt I had about that submit button went out, cleanly, like a pilot light. He wasn't sorry. He wasn't done. He was already planning the next move, and he'd just told me so, thinking I was too stupid to hear it. He was wrong about which one of us was the smart one. I made one more call to my father, because I still needed to know how high it went. If this was Trevor gone rogue, with my parents just looking the other way, that was one kind of grief. If my mother knew, if she'd steered it, that was another. Dad answered from somewhere windy on a deck. He sounded older on the phone than he did in person, and tired. I didn't ambush him. I just said, gently, that I'd found the accounts, and that I knew about the applications, and that I needed him to tell me the truth. He was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. Then he said the thing that closed the last door in my heart. Wendy, your mother said as long as we just left the paperwork alone and didn't make a fuss, it'd all be fine. She said you'd never look. She said you were too busy being important. He wasn't confessing to comfort me. He was explaining, the way a tired man explains a decision that was made above his pay grade. Your mother said. As long as we left the paperwork alone. He knew. He'd always known. And the plan, the actual family plan, spoken aloud at some kitchen table years ago, had been to count on my love and my busyness and my hunger to belong, and to keep the paperwork undisturbed and to let it ride. My mother hadn't been a bystander. She'd been the architect who told everyone to keep still. Thank you for telling me the truth, Dad, I said, and I meant it, because it was the first true thing any of them had given me in 12 years. He started to say something else. My name, maybe an apology forming. The connection cut out. I set the phone down. Now I knew. Now I could decide. For about a day, I convinced myself there was a middle path, and I want to tell you about it, because I think a lot of us reach for the middle path when the honest one is too heavy. Here was my plan. I wouldn't call the police. I wouldn't file the federal report. I wouldn't send my 63-year-old mother into a courtroom. Instead, I'd do it all quietly. I'd sell the house, which I legally owned, while they were still at sea. I'd take my name off everything I could. I'd deal with the open loan somehow, negotiate it, eat the cost if I had to. I'd disappear from their lives with my dignity and my credit intact, and I'd let them come home to a sold house and a locked name and figure it out. No charges, no prison. Just a door quietly closing, and me on the other side of it, free. It felt merciful. It felt like the version of me I wanted to be, someone who could walk away without dragging anyone into a cell. I even started making calls. A real estate agent, a title company, moving pieces into place for the quiet exit. For one day, I let myself believe I could protect myself and still spare them, that I could have the boundary without the blood. I should have known better. In my line of work, the quiet middle path almost never survives contact with the actual numbers, and the numbers were about to speak. Dana called me that afternoon with something new she'd found buried in the records, something that made the quiet plan impossible, something that took the choice I thought I had and set it on fire. Because it turned out the big surprise my mother had promised Sadie wasn't a surprise for the family. It was a trap for me. Wendy, Dana said, and I could tell from her voice she'd found something that scared even her. There's a mortgage application in process. On the house. Your house. I told her that was impossible, that the house was paid for, that I held the deed free and clear. That's exactly why it's valuable, she said. It's a house worth almost $1 million with no lien on it. In your name, with your clean credit. Somebody started an application to take out a large home equity loan against it. In your name. And, Wendy, they listed a minor as a future beneficiary on the paperwork to make it look like a family estate planning move. The minor is a Sadie Thorne. I had to put the phone on the counter for a second. They were going to borrow hundreds of thousands of dollars against the house I owned, forging my name one more time, and they'd dressed it up as a gift to Sadie so that if it ever unraveled, a 9-year-old's name would be tangled in the wreckage. The big surprise. The reason I couldn't be told. This was it. And here's what it did to my tidy little quiet plan. If I sold the house quietly and said nothing, I might get out clean. But that application would still be out there with my forged signature and my niece's name on it, a live grenade. If it went through in the gap before the sale closed, I could be on the hook for a loan I never took, and Sadie's name would be attached to fraud before she lost her first tooth. Silence wasn't mercy anymore. Silence was the thing that left my niece holding the bag. There was no version of quiet that protected her. The only thing that stopped this cold, that pulled her name out and cut the whole machine off at the root, was the exact thing I'd been trying to avoid. The report. The police. The truth. In writing, with all their names on it. I sat with that for a long, cold hour because it changed everything. Up until Dana's call, the choice had been between justice and mercy. I could tell myself that walking away quietly was the kind thing, the bigger thing. Now that comfort was gone. Now the quiet path didn't protect a 9-year-old, it exposed her. It left a fraudulent mortgage application breathing in the dark with her name stapled to mine. If I stayed quiet to spare my parents, I would be spending Sadie to do it. And I was not going to spend Sadie. That was the moment my decision stopped feeling like revenge and started feeling like the only responsible thing left to do. Because here's what they'd never understood about me, what they'd mistaken for weakness for 12 years. I am not a person who tolerates an open, unaddressed liability. It's the whole reason they'd been able to use me. I closed every gap. I paid every bill. I could not stand to leave a thing undone. They'd counted on that to keep me paying. They never once imagined I'd point that same relentlessness at them. I picked the phone back up and called Priya, and my voice didn't shake this time. "I'm filing," I said. "All of it. The federal report, the police report, everything. And I'm selling the house, legally, on the record, before they get back. I'm not doing the quiet version. I can't. There's a child's name on this now." Priya was silent for a second. Then she said, "Okay. Then we do it right. And we do it airtight. So that when they come home, there is nothing left for them to spin." I felt the last of my hope for a soft landing burn off. And under it, unexpectedly, was something like relief. There was one person I thought might not be all the way in. Kayla, Trevor's wife, Sadie's mother. She'd taken my cabin without blinking, but I kept thinking about how her name wasn't on any of the forged applications, only Trevor's. Maybe she was a passenger on this too. Maybe, mother to a daughter whose name was now on a fraudulent mortgage, she'd want out. I reached her the night before the ship docked, on a real phone call, and for a few minutes I thought I'd found an ally. When I told her, carefully, that there was paperwork with Sadie's name on it connected to a loan, she went quiet. And then she said, "I told him. I told Trevor to leave Sadie out of it." So she knew. Not everything, maybe, but enough. She knew there was an it, and she knew her daughter should be kept clear of it. For one hopeful minute she sounded like someone about to do the right thing. I asked her gently if she'd be willing to tell the truth about what she knew, if it came to that. And that's where she folded. The line went cold. "I can't get involved in this, Wendy," she said, her voice dropping. "This is your family's mess. Trevor's my husband, Sadie's father. I have to think about her." I said that thinking about Sadie was exactly why she should speak up. But she was already retreating, already recalculating her own safety, and I understood I'd just lost the last person who might have stood beside me. "Please don't call here again," she said, and hung up. So that was that. No cavalry, no sister-in-law turning state's witness. Just me, my documents, and a decision that no one in that family was going to help me carry. I'd be doing this alone. I'd always been doing this alone. I just finally knew it. Alone turned out to be clarifying. With no one to protect and no one to persuade, I could finally just be precise. Priya and I sat down and built the whole thing like a case file, because that's the only language that can't be spun. First, the identity theft report through the FTC, complete. Every account itemized, dated, with the forged applications attached as exhibits. Second, the police report, filed in person, my affidavit sworn, the printouts and photos entered as evidence, the fake mortgage application flagged as an active, in-progress crime, so it could be stopped before it funded. Third, the disputes to each lender, backed now by real report numbers, to strip every fraudulent account off my name for good. And running alongside all of it, on a separate, entirely legal track, the sale of the house. My house. Deed in my name, free and clear, no lien, no co-owner, nothing stopping me. I could sell it, and I would, and I'd time the closing so it was final before their plane landed. Priya double-checked every step. "This is the part where people get sloppy because they're angry," she said. "You're not going to be sloppy. You're going to be so clean that when they try to tell everyone you're the villain, The paperwork tells the truth for you. That was the plan. No ambush. No dramatic reveal in a crowded room. No screaming. Just documents, filed in the right order, with the right agencies, in daylight. The most powerful thing I did in this entire story, I did sitting quietly at a table with a lawyer, checking boxes. It wasn't cinematic. It was better than cinematic. It was irreversible. And once it started moving, there'd be no calling it back. I looked at the stack of forms, took a breath, and told Priya I was ready to make the list of everything I was about to lose. Before I signed anything, I made myself write down the cost. Not the money, the other cost. I'm a planner. I don't make big moves without knowing the full price, and I wasn't going to pretend this one was free. So I sat down and I listed everything I was about to lose. My mother, my father, my brother. Any chance of a real relationship with Sadie because you don't get to send a girl's grandparents to prison and stay her cozy weekend aunt. Every future Thanksgiving, even the bad ones. The fantasy. The one I'd been feeding for 12 years with checks and gifts and cruises, that someday they'd finally see me and say, "We were wrong. Come home. We love you." That fantasy was the most expensive thing on the list, and it was the thing I'd been paying installments on my whole adult life. I looked at the list a long time, and I understood something that I'd been circling for weeks without landing on. Love that keeps a ledger isn't love, it's collateral. That's what they'd offered me, all along. Not affection, but a line of credit against my need to belong, and they'd been drawing on it since I was 22. Every dollar I gave was a payment on a debt that never came due, because it was never meant to. The seat at the table was always going to stay empty, because an empty seat is what kept me paying. Writing that list didn't make the choice easier. It made it clearer. I wasn't giving up a family. I was giving up the fantasy of one, and keeping the actual breathing person, me, that I'd been sacrificing to it. I capped the pen, folded the list, and put it in my pocket. Then I called the real estate agent and told her to move fast. Selling a house in a week is not normal. But a paid-off, move-in-ready home priced to move, in a good school district, in a hot market, with a motivated seller who holds a clean title, is a different animal. My agent, a brisk woman named Renata who did not ask a single nosy question once she saw the deed, listed it quietly, cash buyers only, quick close. We had 3 offers in 72 hours. I took the cleanest one, a couple relocating for work who wanted possession fast and didn't need to finance. And then I did the thing that made my hands cold even as I did it. I scheduled the closing for the morning the cruise was due back in port. Not out of cruelty, out of arithmetic. The fraudulent mortgage application was still out there, and every day the house sat in my name unsold was a day someone could try to fund a loan against it. Selling it, transferring the title to an unrelated third party, killed that application dead, because you cannot borrow against a house you no longer own. The sale wasn't just my exit, it was the kill switch on the whole scheme. So the timing wasn't a message, it was a mechanism. But I won't pretend some small, tired part of me didn't understand the shape of it. They would fly home, drive out from the airport, pull into the long driveway of the house they thought was theirs, and the key would not turn, because I would have done to them, once, cleanly, and with the law on my side, exactly what they had done to me for 12 years in the dark. I signed the listing paperwork. Renata said, "Congratulations." I didn't feel congratulated. I felt like I was finally standing up after sitting too long. 2 days before they landed, I sat down at my kitchen table in the early morning, coffee going cold beside me, and I did the irreversible thing. First, I submitted the identity theft report to the FTC. The cursor hovered for only a moment this time, and then I clicked, and the confirmation number filled the screen, long and official, and there was no taking it back. Then Priya drove me to the police station, and I sat across from a detective named Alvarez and swore out my affidavit, and I handed over the printouts, the forged applications, the photos of the mail, the flagged mortgage application. I watched him read it, watched his eyebrows go up at the 12-year span, watched him understand what he was looking at. He said quietly, "Ma'am, I'm sorry. This is a lot of loss." I said thank you. Then he asked me to confirm the names of the individuals I was reporting, and I said them out loud, in a police station, to a man with a badge and a pen. My mother's name, my father's name, my brother's name. Saying them out loud in that room made it real in a way no form ever could. The old life, the one where I was the daughter who paid and hoped, ended in that sentence. There was no version of tomorrow where I unsaid those names. Some of you already know what it costs to sign your own name back onto your own life. If you've been there, tell me below. And subscribe, because this is where it turns. I walked out of that station into ordinary daylight, and I felt strangely, completely calm. I had crossed the line I'd been standing at for weeks. Behind me, the bridge was burning. Ahead of me, for the first time, was just my own life, waiting. The next 2 days moved fast and quiet, the way things do once you stop fighting the current and start steering it. The sale went to closing. I sat in Renata's title office and signed page after page, my real signature, the looped W, the skipped H, on documents that were actually mine to sign. Escrow processed. The wire hit. And just like that, the house I'd bought them, the house they'd changed the locks on, the house they'd labeled my belongings for donation inside of, belonged to a nice couple named the Osbornes, who were planning to paint the guest room for their new baby. I felt no triumph handing over the keys, only a strange lightness, the way you feel when you finally set down something heavy you'd carried so long you forgot it was optional. Meanwhile, the police report did its work. Detective Alvarez called to say the fraudulent mortgage application had been flagged and frozen, dead in the water, Sadie's name pulled clear of it. The open personal loan was formally in dispute now, documented as fraud, being removed from my file. Piece by piece, my name was coming back to me, scrubbed clean by the same paperwork my family had assumed I'd never have the nerve to file. I updated my spreadsheet one last time. In that fourth column, the one I'd left blank for so long, the one where I'd finally typed "It started here" beside the year I turned 22, I went down to the final row, the current year, and I typed a short final line. "It ends here." Then I saved it, closed the laptop, and looked at the calendar. Tomorrow morning, a ship would dock. A family would fly home. And they would arrive at a house that was no longer theirs, carrying suitcases, expecting a surprise that had already surprised them. The freeze started biting before their plane even landed. My phone lit up that evening with Trevor's name, then again, then a string of texts that got less charming with each one. "Hey, call me." "Wendy, what's going on with your credit?" "I'm at the airport trying to sort something and there's a hold. Did you do something?" So the freeze had done exactly what freezes do. Somewhere in a terminal, my brother had tried to move on some piece of his plan, tried to open or draw against something in my name, and hit a locked door with my pin behind it. He couldn't get through, and for the first time in 12 years, he couldn't understand why. The goose had stopped laying. I didn't answer. Then the calls started, one after another, until my phone was just his name blinking on and off like a warning light. When I finally let one go to voicemail and played it back, the salesman warmth was gone. "Wendy, what did you do? You froze everything. I've got things riding on this. You don't understand. Mom's gonna lose it. Call me back right now." I've got things riding on this. Even now, cornered, he wasn't sorry. He was just angry that the tool had stopped working. I set the phone face down. Detective Alvarez had told me to expect this, and to save everything and respond to nothing. So I saved the texts, saved the voicemail, and said nothing. Let them feel, for one night, a fraction of the powerlessness I'd lived in for weeks. The specific helplessness of watching something happen to your name and not being able to stop it. Except mine had been a crime, and theirs was just consequences. And here is what made it bearable to stay silent. They still had no idea how far it had already gone. All they knew, from a locked terminal and a card that wouldn't draw, was that something had snarled up with the credit, a glitch, a hold, A hassle to be smoothed over with the right phone call. They didn't know I'd found the accounts. They didn't know the house was already sold and a stranger held the deed. They had never heard the words fraud alert or police report. Didn't know there was a detective with a case number and a folder full of their names. Didn't know a mortgage application had been flagged as active fraud. To them, this was still a billing problem. To me, it was a closed file. They were flying home to a reckoning, and they still thought it was a misunderstanding. Tomorrow, they'd learn the difference. I didn't have to be there. Renata told me the new owners weren't taking possession until the following week, so the house would sit empty that morning, and I could have stayed home and let the locked door do its work without me. But I decided to go. Not to gloat. To be a witness to my own life for once, instead of the person things happened to. I parked across the street, far enough back to be just another car, and I waited. A little before noon, the rideshare from the airport pulled into the long driveway, and they spilled out, sunburned and loud, hauling suitcases, Sadie running ahead, my mother in a new sun hat, my father moving slow, Trevor already on his phone. I watched my mother walk up to the front door with the confidence of a woman coming home to a house she believed was hers. I watched her reach for the handle. I watched the key she pulled from her purse fail to turn, once, twice, the way mine had failed weeks ago on that same porch. I watched her step back and look up at the house as if it had insulted her. Then I watched Trevor try and fail and start pounding on the door, and a neighbor come out, Diane again, to say she didn't know, that a young couple had been by, that she thought the house had sold. I watched my mother's face change as the word sold reached her. I got out of my car. I crossed the street. And they turned, all of them, and saw me walking up the driveway of the house they'd thrown me out of, calm as anything. And I watched the exact moment they understood that the surprise had not gone the way they'd planned it. I stopped at the bottom of the steps. "You're home?" I said. My mother recovered first because she always did. She smoothed her face into the expression she used for church and confrontations, and she said, "Wendy, what have you done to our house? Our house, even now." I let the word sit in the air between us. "It was never our house, Mom," I said. "The deed was in my name. It's been in my name for 3 years. You knew that. You wanted it that way." Trevor pushed forward, red-faced. "You sold our house? You can't just sell our house." "I can sell my house," I said. And I did. My father just stood there on the driveway with his suitcase, looking older than the ocean had made him, saying nothing, which was the most honest thing he'd done in years. My mother tried a different key, the emotional one. "How could you do this to your family? After everything we've done for you? We raised you. We gave you everything." And there it was. The old machine, still running, still trying to bill me for my own childhood. A month ago, it would have worked. A month ago, I'd have felt the guilt rise up my throat like it always did. But I'd spent that month reading the receipts. "Everything you did for me," I said, and my voice stayed level, which I could see was unnerving her more than shouting would have. "Let's talk about everything you did for me. You want to do this here, on the driveway?" Because I brought copies. I hadn't raised my voice once. She had. Sadie had gone quiet and moved behind her grandfather, sensing the way children do that the ground had shifted. And my mother, who had spent my whole life being the calmest, most composed person in every room, was starting to come apart at the edges, her hands moving, her voice climbing. The power in the driveway was not sitting where any of them had assumed it sat. It was sitting with the daughter they'd left at the pier, and she was not done talking. I laid it out for them, quietly, the way you read a verdict. The accounts, the 12 years, the forged signatures, the open loan, the mortgage application with Sadie's name on it. I watched my mother's face as each item landed, and I watched her realize that I knew all of it, not a piece. All of it, documented. And something in her broke, not into apology, but into a kind of raw honesty I'd never seen from her in 34 years. "You have no idea," she said, and her voice cracked. What it's like to give your whole life to a family and end up with nothing. I said I was starting to get an idea, actually. She kept going, the words coming out of some old wound. My mother did the same to me. Your grandmother. She took everything I ever earned from the time I was 15. Signed me up for things. Ran up bills. Told me family means what's yours is ours. I never had a single thing that was just mine, not one. And then I had you, and I thought, finally, we'll have some security. Finally, somebody in this family will have money and we'll all be safe. She wasn't lying. I could see it. The girl she'd been, robbed by her own mother, taught that this was simply how families worked, taught that a child was a retirement plan. For one moment, I felt the pull of it, the near sympathy, the understanding that she was a link in a chain that started long before me. She had been Sadie once. She had been me once. But here's the thing I understood, standing on that driveway, that she never had. Knowing why the chain exists is not the same as being allowed to keep it going. I believe you, I told her, and I did. I believe your mother did this to you. That's the saddest thing I've heard in a long time. I let that land. And that's exactly why I'm not going to let you do it to Sadie. Her face went white. She understood then that I hadn't just come to take back a house. My mother did the last thing she had left. She stopped managing, and she begged. She dropped her purse on the driveway and she took a step toward me with her hands open, and the composure I'd feared my whole life was just gone. Wendy, please, please. Whatever you found, whatever you did, we can undo it. You can call them back. Tell them it was a mistake, a misunderstanding. Tell them to close the report. We're your family.